Good evening, students. So, today we are going to discuss a very important chapter, a chapter that is important not only from the standpoint of exam, but it also carries a lot of importance when you actually go into practice. Appeals and revision is what we are going to discuss today over next 3 hours. So probably if the time permits, we'll touch upon revision, and if the time doesn't permit, then we'll try to complete the appeals chapter and some of the miscellaneous provisions connected with the appeals, and thereafter in the next session maybe we'll touch upon the revision along with the dispute resolution related provisions. So with this, let us start with the chapter. So what is it that we are going to discuss today? So far I believe you have already been completely thorough with the provisions relating to, just a minute, is my voice audible? Okay, so I believe that so far you have already gone through the entire process of assessment. Like once we file the return of income, then the return goes for assessment. Assessing officer verifies the claims made during the course of assessment, and then he passes the final assessment order. Now, once the officer is passing the final assessment order, and if you are aggrieved with the adjustment or any kind of demands which are raised by the tax officer, what are the options that are available to you? This is what we are going to discuss today. So there is an appeal mechanism provided under the income tax law. So as you can see, this is the overview of the chapter. So we all know that, let's take a simple illustration. An assessee has filed the return of income under section 139(1). A regular return of income has been filed wherein he has declared the income earned during the entire previous year, and he has paid the tax liability. Assessee is a businessman, so he has filed the income tax return under and declared the income under the business head. Now, once the return is filed, how it happens practically? The return is first processed. So there will be a repetition here a little bit, because just to connect with the appeal chapter, I have to give you the background of what happens prior to appeal. So once the return is filed, the return is then processed without any human intervention. The system, or the central processing center, CPC is what we call it, CPC will process the return. It would be a computerized processing wherein the system would check various arithmetical accuracies or inaccuracies, the claims which are erroneous or patently wrong on the face of it, the calculations done in the income tax return. So everything would go through the scrutiny. For example, if there is any income which is reflected in your form 26AS, which you have not shown in your income tax return, any receipt or payments which are specified in AIS, any capital gain transaction which you have not shown in your capital gain schedule. So all these inconsistencies are now identified by the system itself, and then the CPC will sort of intimate you about the inaccuracies or mismatches. Once these inaccuracies are identified, assessee will receive the intimation order under section 143, subsection 1. 143(1) is what we call it, an intimation. Now, when I receive an intimation, I will see whatever is declared in the return of income, is it correctly reflected in the intimation? If there is any inaccuracy, either I accept that and rectify the defect and file the return again, or rectify it through the portal, or alternatively, if I wish to challenge that adjustment, I file an appeal. Now, let's say, for example, there is no defect in the intimation. Whatever I had declared in the return, that has been accepted. Then the next stage comes where the department has, under 143 subsection 3, the power to carry out a scrutiny assessment in your case, whereby under section 143 subsection 2, the assessing officer, now it is National Faceless Assessment Center, they will issue you a notice. And in that notice, they will sort of intimate you that we are going to carry out the scrutiny assessment in your case. Scrutiny assessment is a lengthy process. Earlier, it was being done face-to-face, where the officer and assessee will sit face-to-face, discussions will happen, the notice will be issued, you will know who is your assessing officer, and all the claims which you have made, they would be scrutinized in detail, and based on the scrutiny, they will pass the assessment order. In the assessment order, the officer might make certain additions, or he might accept the income as per the return of income. Now, the issue arises, if the officer is making the adjustment, then what is the remedy available to the assessee to challenge the addition made by the assessing officer? So this is the hierarchy. You can see the assessee can file an appeal before the Commissioner of Income Tax Appeal or the Joint Commissioner of Income Tax Appeals. So this is popularly called as a first appellate authority. Now, Joint Commissioner and Commissioner. So earlier it was only the Commissioner of Income Tax Appeal. In a recent budget, Finance Act 2023 sort of brought in an amendment, and they said that because of a pendency of appeals at the CIT appeal levels, there was a large pendency. So they made an amendment whereby a new category or a new specific authority was created, Joint Commissioner Appeals, and all fresh appeals or even the old appeals which involves either a smaller amount of stake or the situation where, or it is specified in the section itself, section 246, those orders which have been passed by the officers lower in rank, those appeal will be heard by the Joint Commissioner of Income Tax Appeal. So this is the first appellate authority. Then we have a second appellate authority, the Income Tax Appellate Tribunal, ITAT is what we call it. Thereafter, we have a third and fourth, which is final Supreme Court. So we have a High Court and then the Supreme Court. We'll be discussing each of the provisions, what are the powers of the courts. Then we'll discuss or debate about the stay and what kind of orders which are appealable, what are the orders which are non-appealable, who is the final fact-finding authority, what are the conditions before you file an appeal, time period, procedure, everything is what we are going to discuss. Then there are provisions relating to revision. We probably may not touch today in the interest of time, but we'll see it in the next session. We'll also be discussing the procedure when the assessee claims that there is an identical question of law which is pending before a High Court or a Supreme Court. Then is there any way through which the overall situation looks like if, let's say, for example, you have filed an appeal and the appeal is pending before High Court or Supreme Court on a particular issue. Now, on a very same issue, department is again making certain adjustment. So is there any way in which we can avoid the repetitive filing of appeal? Because the question of law involved across the years is identical. So likewise, we will be discussing at last the monetary limit for filing of appeal by the Income Tax Authority, popularly called as a low tax effect circular issued by CBDT, and then doctrine of partial and total merger. Thereafter, some of the case studies which are there. So let us first begin with the appeal before the Joint Commissioner or the Commissioner of Income Tax Appeals, Section 246. So see, whether it is an income tax law or any other revenue law, if you are aggrieved or you are affected by the action of an assessing officer or any income tax authority or any other authority, you will see under all revenue laws, there is an appeal mechanism. Now, the Supreme Court has said in some of the matters that a right to file an appeal is not an inherent or a fundamental right. Right to file an appeal is only when the statute or law or act specifically provides for that. For example, if an addition is made in your case or in any assessee's case, he can file an appeal only and only when such an order is an appealable order. If the order is not specified in the Income Tax Act as an appealable order, you cannot file an appeal. Let us see first which orders are covered wherein we can file an appeal, and what are the orders wherein we cannot file an appeal before Commissioner of Income Tax Appeal. So, an assessee aggrieved by an order of by any of the following orders of an assessing officer below the rank of Joint Commissioner may appeal to the Joint Commissioner Appeals against an order. Now, this is the list of order. What is important to highlight here is, as I mentioned, order first has to be an appealable order. Following orders. The word used is following orders. Unlike you would have read section 154, wherein the power to make an amendment or to rectify a mistake is against any order. For example, if there is any kind of error or apparent mistake in any order, I can file an application for rectification, and likewise department can also carry a suo motu rectification. Now that usage of the word in that provision is any order. Whereas in this section 246, they are using the word following order. That means the list is exhaustive. If there is any action through which you are aggrieved, you cannot file an appeal if it is not specified here. So let us see what is specified. An order being an intimation under section 143(1). So if there is any adjustment made by CPC under section 143(1), where the assessee objects to the making of adjustment, or an order of assessment under 143(3) or 144. 143(3) relates to normal assessment order. 144 relates to ex parte assessment order, where the assessee objects to the amount of income assessed. So if the AO has made any addition and you are aggrieved, you do not want that addition to happen in your hand, or if the amount of tax determined, you are aggrieved by the demand, or the amount of loss computed, say you have declared X amount and the officer has reduced that loss by X minus 1, you are still aggrieved, even though there is no final tax liability, but because your loss has been reduced, you are aggrieved. That deprives you from setting off your loss for the future years. So even if there is no tax liability, you can still file an appeal if you have incurred a loss and that loss is reduced, or where the status under which the assessment is made, like individual is assessed as an HUF or vice versa. Second, order of assessment, reassessment or recomputation under 147. So similarly, if it is a case where reassessment is carried out and in the process of reassessment any addition is made or even any recomputation is made, let's say he has not made any adjustment to the total income, but he has made an adjustment, officer has made an adjustment about the rate at which your income is taxable. In that situation, you can file an appeal against an order being an intimation under section 200 capital A subsection 1, where the deductor objects to the making of adjustment. Now, as you all know, section 200 capital A relates to processing of TDS returns or TDS statement. Once we file the TDS return, the return gets processed by what we call as traces, and the traces website will let us know whether there is any demand or not. If you are aggrieved by that adjustment, you can prefer an appeal before the Commissioner of Income Tax Appeal or Joint Commissioner. And likewise, I'm not getting into each of these sections in detail, but as you can see, it is self-explanatory. If the order is passed under section 201, declaring an assessee to be assessee in default for failure, if there is a failure to deduct or deposit tax, or if it is a case of a TCS, tax collected at source, and you are failed to collect tax, and likewise, if there is any penalty imposed under chapter under the Income Tax Act or an order under section 154 or 155. Now, penalty TDS, TCS, quantum assessment, and at last section 154 and 155. If, let's say, in the assessment order there is no adjustment, but then officer suo moto through rectification under section 154, if he makes any adjustment, if you are aggrieved by that adjustment, you can prefer an appeal and challenge the rectification proceedings before the Commissioner of Income Tax Appeal. Now, please note, no appeal can be filed before the Joint Commissioner of Income Tax Appeal if any of the above order is passed by or with the prior approval of an authority above the rank of Deputy Commissioner. So what was the logic? So see, there are two sections. One is section 246, which we are reading right now. It is nothing but appeal before the Joint Commissioner of Income Tax Appeal. This is covered by section 246. Whereas we have another section 246 capital A, which relates to appeal before the Commissioner of Income Tax Appeals. Appealable order before the Commissioner of Income Tax Appeals. So why? So the authority, appellate authority as such is parallel, because whether it is joint appeal or commissioner appeal, against the order passed by any of them, the matter would go to the tribunal, the next appellate authority. Joint Commissioner of Appeal, designation wise, he is junior to Commissioner of Income Tax Appeal. So therefore, specifically, they have said that why this, so a little bit of historical background, why this category of joint appeal was created. So there was a pendency of, until 2021, there was a pendency of more than 5 lakh appeals before the Income Tax Department, Commissioner of Income Tax Appeal. A lot of matters involved small matters, small stakes, or in such situations, a lot of covered matters were also there. Because the matters were not getting disposed of, they created another category of, in the appeal mechanism. They said, okay, now we authorize the Joint Commissioner of Income Tax Appeal, and around 100 odd JCITs were appointed as a first appellate authority. Now, if you read here, no appeal shall be filed before Joint Commissioner Appeal if any of the above order is passed by or with the prior approval of the authority above the rank of Deputy Commissioner. So what is the hierarchy? It is the inspector assists the assessing officer. Then we call it, so at assessing officer, we have the different designation, like income tax officer, we call it ITO, Assistant Commissioner of Income Tax, Deputy Commissioner of Income Tax, and we have then Joint Commissioner and then Commissioner. If the order, any of these orders are passed by an authority which is lower in rank, like for example, Income Tax Officer, then appeal will lie before the Joint Commissioner of Income Tax Appeals. If the authority passing the order is senior in rank, for example, a Joint Commissioner can also be an assessing officer. A commissioner can also be an assessing officer. Deputy commissioner, assessing officer. So if they are passing an order, then it's a natural corollary. It has to be an officer higher in rank who should be designated as an appellate authority. So therefore, if the officer passing the order is above the rank of DCIT, that is Deputy Commissioner of Income Tax, the appeal will not lie before the joint appeals, but it will go to the CIT appeal. Now, let us move to the next session. Appeal pending before Commissioner Appeal in respect of appealable order may be transferred to the Joint Commissioner. 246 subsection 2. Now, what it says, while all the fresh appeals will be filed before joint appeals, provided other conditions are satisfied, which we discussed, but even the existing pendency which is there, like for example, old appeals were being filed before Commissioner Appeals, even those appeals will also be transferred based on the order to be passed by the CBDT to the joint appeals. This will effectively reduce the pendency at the CIT appeal level. So this is just an enabling provision. Nothing much to be discussed here. Likewise, if a fresh appeal is filed before the Joint Commissioner Appeals, or the existing appeals are pending before the Joint Commissioner appeal, the same can also be transferred to the Commissioner appeal. So it is vice versa. Before they do any kind of transfer, either ways, the opportunity of being heard will be provided to the affected taxpayer. Central government to empower to notify the faceless appeal scheme. So I think you all have understood the concept of faceless assessment, where the assessment is carried out by National Faceless Assessment Center. The jurisdictional officer is not assessing your income. The assessment is allocated randomly through computerized algorithm to different assessing officers who may not be in the same city or in the same state. It can be anywhere in India, and he might assess your income. And you will not come to know who is the assessing officer. At no point of time, the order or notice issued by officer will contain its name. Now, initially, it was the faceless assessment. Later on, they said that to bring in efficiency, the speed of disposal, they said that we will extend this scheme of faceless to the appellate mechanism also. So they proposed the carrying out of commissioner. The proposal was to carry out the faceless appeal for first and second level, like commissioner appeal as well as Itat. But then eventually they have not notified any faceless appeal scheme for Itat. But for all in normal income tax appeals, which are filed or pending before CIT appeal, all the matters are now being carried out in a faceless manner, wherein we don't know who the officer first level appellate authority is. Now let us discuss what are the orders which are appealable before the Commissioner of Income Tax Appeals and what is the difference. That is most important. An assessee or any deductor or any collector aggrieved. So assessee means in the normal case where assessment is carried out, you are an assessee. If it is a case where you have failed to deduct TDS or TCS, then you are a deductor or collector. So in the context, you will have to read. Aggrieved by the following order. Again, the specific order, not any order. An order passed by the Joint Commissioner under Section 115 VP relating to refusal or denial of approval of the option for tonnage tax scheme. Order against the assessee where the assessee denies his liability to be assessed under this act. So these are the specific situations. Now, can anybody say what is it? What is that situation where the assessee denies his liability to be assessed under this act? Can anyone provide any example? What we are talking about at situation 2? Okay, you want me to allow you to unmute. So Akashji, there is a query in the chat box that students are not able to unmute themselves. Can you please look into it? अच्छा, okay. They can put into the question, right? Question box में ही डाल सकते हैं. ठीक है. Anybody would want to try? An order against the assessee where the assessee denies his liability to be assessed under the Act. Say, for example, a trust is approved under Section 12A. Now that trust is assessed under the Income Tax Act. While carrying out the assessment, the assessing officer treats the trust as an association of person and carries out the assessment. In this case, an assessee can file an appeal stating that the assessee does not agree with the approach of the assessing officer to treat itself as an AOP instead of a trust, and likewise a cooperative society, or it can be any other example where the assessee denies its liability to be assessed under this act. Then we have a similar provision, an intimation under 143(1), 200A, 206CD, where the assessee or deductor or collector objects to the making of adjustment. This is important. An order of assessment under 143(3). If an assessment order is passed under 143(3), yes, somebody has raised the hand. Okay. Yes, Urvi.
Sir, in the example you had given for the second point, an order against the assessee where the assessee denies his liability. Sir, for a trust, the classification as a person will be AOP BOI only, no?
That is true. But then, if you see, if a trust is approved under Section 12A, it is eligible for exemption, eligible for deductions as per the scheme provided under 12A or 12AB.
Okay.
Where AOB, the tax rates are different.
Okay.
So if you characterize or recharacterize the status of the assessee, it can be any example. It can be a case of HUF also. HUF is also run by a Karta and it has certain members and it is a separate entity and it is eligible to avail the basic exemption. So there are different provisions. But if he reclassifies an HUF into an AOP, even that can also be an example.
Okay.
Right? There is one more example, an interesting, wherein, like in case of a non-resident, it is the agent in whose hands, if the assessing officer is carrying out the assessment, then, or like for example, if I'm a representative assessee for someone else, and if I deny my liability to be assessed in the capacity of representative assessee, I can challenge the order under this section.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. Then the fourth one is order of assessment under section 143(3), except an order passed in pursuance of a directions of DRP. So I'm sure we have not yet gone through the provisions relating to dispute resolution panel, but to explain it simply, we'll get into it in detail. Normal assessment is carried out by an assessing officer. There are specific cases where the assessment is carried out by an assessing officer and then draft order is passed instead of the final order. Take the case of a transfer pricing issue. If in any assessment there is an adjustment on account of TP matter, or take an example of a foreign company. If the assessment is being carried out in the hands of a foreign company, they have an option that once the assessment is framed, the officer does not finalize the assessment, he passes a draft order. The draft order is then served to the assessee with an option to file an objection before DRP or to accept the draft assessment order. If the assessee accepts the order, then it is finalized. If the assessee doesn't accept the order, the matter goes to the DRP. DRP consists of a group of commissioners who will adjudicate the matter and pass the direction to the assessing officer whether they will confirm or they might sort of cancel or reduce the addition. That we'll see later. But then matter goes to DRP, and based on the direction of DRP, dispute resolution panel, the assessing officer will pass the final assessment order. Against that final assessment order, no appeal would lie before the commissioner appeal. The appeal would be filed directly before the ITAT. So here, consciously they have carved out an exception where if the order is passed under 143(3), but if the order is passed in pursuance of directions of DRP, that will not be appealable under this section. The appeal against the same issue will lie directly to the Itat. We will see in the subsequent paragraphs. If the issue involved is other than, or if the order passed is other than the order which has been subjected to the directions of DRP, then the assessment order would be appealable before the CIT appeal. So just to provide more clarity, we'll understand here through some illustration. Sorry if it is not legible. If the assessment order is passed under 143.3, sorry, let me do it differently. If it is a domestic company or it is a foreign company. Domestic company के case में, if the assessment is carried out, let's say under 143.3, scrutiny assessment is carried out. In this case also, scrutiny assessment is carried out. Now, when the time to pass an order comes, in this case, we have to check whether the additions made are, so what in practice we call it as corporate tax additions, like normal income tax additions, or transfer pricing additions. And in this case, it can be any addition, any nature of addition. If the order passed by officer is only corporate tax addition, then no DRP option is available. No DRP. If officer has referred the matter for TP assessment to TPO, and pursuant to that, if there is any addition towards transfer pricing issues, then the officer is required to pass the draft assessment order. In this case, in case of a foreign company, whatever may be the addition, whether corp tax or TP, officer will have to pass compulsorily draft assessment order. Now, against this, if corporate tax addition is there, only corporate tax addition, normal procedure, officer will not pass the draft order. The appeal will lie before the CIT appeals. If the officer is making TP addition, or if he is making both corporate tax addition, like normal disallowances and additions, or at the same time some transfer pricing issues are involved, then compulsorily he will have to pass the draft order. Post draft order, you can either accept or deny. If you deny, then you file objections before DRP. DRP will give directions to AO. AO to finalize the assessment as per the direction and pass an order under section 143.3 read with 144C जो DRP वाला section है. Now, let us say if I accept, that's the end of the story. Or alternatively, if I do not accept, but at the same time, if I do not wish to opt for the DRP route, then I can file an appeal before CIT appeal. But this step will come only after AO passes the final assessment order. Like I will communicate to AO, okay, you have made a TP adjustment. I am not filing objection before DRP. Please finalize the assessment. He will finalize and then I will file an appeal before the CIT appeal. And the same will be applicable. The entire process is applicable in case of a foreign company. So DRP route was brought in specifically to ensure there is a fast track disposal of appeal. If it is a case of appeal before CIT appeal, there is no statutory timeline provided in the law by which they have to dispose of the matter. Whereas in case of DRP, there is a timeline of 9 months from the end of the month in which you file an objection before DRP. So for quick disposal, this DRP route was brought in. So therefore, they have said that if the matter has been passed through DRP stage, then you don't need to refer the file and appeal to CIT appeal, because both are almost parallel in nature. They are parallel. Like CIT appeal is what? He is a commissioner. And at the same time, DRP is what? It's a group of commissioners. So authority is parallel. The order cannot be appealable. It has to go to a higher authority, which is Itat. And likewise, if you see, if the order is in consequence of GAR, like if the officer has invoked the general anti-avoidance rule or a best judgment under 144 in relation to income assessed or to the amount of assessed or to the amount of loss computed or the status under which you are assessed. So GAR has been invoked, then you have to file an appeal before Itat only. Here, the only change is 143(3) ki jagah 147. Rest almost it is identical. Likewise, an order made under section 92 CD subsection 3 modifying the total income. Here we are talking about the ALP adjustment, which is nothing but the income determined pursuant to advance pricing agreement entered into. So if there is any order made, I'm not sure whether you have gone through the transfer pricing chapter, but I'll not get into detail too much, but if there is any order passed, so what is APA? Anybody wants to try? What is APA? I just get to know whether you have gone through this provision or do I have to repeat it? Just put it in chat box. Are we aware of? Chat is also disabled. So someone is saying chat be disabled kiya hai Zoom mein. Let me see. I'll just put it here. I can put a message. What you can alternatively do, just raise your hand and I will unmute you. On the Zoom, there is an option where you can raise your hand and I'll come to know and then I'll unmute you. Yes. Jim. Yes.
सर एक्चुअली हमारा ट्रांसफर प्राइसिंग चैप्टर अभी बाकी है.
अच्छा बाकी है. So I'll just briefly give you an idea. So what happens in case of so what is transfer pricing? We'll spend 2 minutes. If two companies are located in two different countries, like for example, company A is an Indian company, company B is incorporated in US. Both of them enter into transaction. Now both are related. Time being assumed both are owned. A is owning B or likewise B is owning A, whatever it is. Both are group companies and related parties. If they carry out an intercompany transaction, the officer, then the law requires that the transaction should be at arm's length, like at market rate. If the transaction is not as per the arm's length principle, the assessing officer refers the matter to a special wing, which is called as transfer pricing or transfer pricing officer. They make an adjustment. And they carry out the TP assessment. And if they find that the rate at which we have entered into transaction is not as per the terms and conditions or as per the independent market practice, they will make an addition. And that is popularly called as a transfer pricing adjustment. Now, if there is any adjustment made towards TP, we go to DRP. So that is the brief idea about TP. It's a vast subject in itself, but whatever minimum provisions are contained, you will some other faculty will take you through those provisions. A rectification order under section 154 or 155, having the effect of enhancing the assessment, reducing the refund, or an order refusing to allow the claim made by the assessee under either of the said section, except an order of assessment passed by AO with the prior approval of commissioner, where the tax consequence have been determined in the order under in connection with the GAR. So this exception is always there where, so it's a common, if you just apply a common sense here, because that is always going to drive the things. If the order is passed by someone who is at a commissioner level, then you can't approach the commissioner appeal. Now, if you see GAR, General Anti-Avoidance Rule, it is an anti-abuse law where officer can recharacterize your transaction, and the Act has given vast power under the GAR provisions, Chapter 10A. So, the GAR can be invoked by assessing officer only after approval of the commissioner. So, there are already some checks and balances. So, if there is anything of that sort where commissioner is involved, you can't file an appeal before commissioner appeal. You have to go to Itat or explore some other route. So that is why these exceptions. Then we have 8, an order made under section 163 treating the assessee as agent of non-resident. Now here in this case, the only issue by which I am aggrieved is, for example, there is a foreign company. Officer issues notice to me and he treats me as an agent of a non-resident or a foreign company, and he carries out assessment in my name. Now, the assessment and the additions pursuant to assessment is a separate thing, which will continue as it is. But the fact that he treats me as an agent of a foreign company or a non-resident, that fact I deny. Therefore, the law gives me the power option to file an appeal against the action of AO under section 163 before the CIT appeal under section 246 capital A. And likewise, we have other sections. I'm not discussing each in detail. You can read it. It is self-explanatory. Yeah, one is important. Even the penalty order passed under section 221 or under any of the provisions of the law as per chapter specified, you can file an appeal before the Commissioner Appeals. Any questions so far? Yeah, let me unmute.
Here in point number 8, which you discussed, an order made under section 163, treating the assessee as an agent of the non-resident. So in that point, you said that the fact is being, challenged or appealed. But then what about the assessment? Like if he's an agent of the non-resident, then some portion of the income which is received from that non-resident foreign company will be taxed in his hands. And you know that if he wants to challenge that, then
Okay. So see what happens. Let us take a practical scenario. There is a foreign company. That foreign company operates in India through its website. It doesn't have any person in India that just does business with India through its website. No presence whatsoever. But then there is an individual Mr. X who is somehow or in some manner, you will see in section 163, he is connected with that foreign company, either through some business dealings or through some employer-employee relationship or whatever it is. Now, officer says, now because I cannot catch hold of that foreign company has earned income which is liable to tax in India, let's say under section 9. Now, I don't have territorial right as such to catch that foreign company. Enforceability nahi ho pati. So they said we'll carry out the assessment in the hands of Mr. X because he has that connection with the foreign company. So वो notice issue करता है X को. X will say, hey, look, I am not an agent of a non-resident as described by you, and therefore the assessment should not be carried out in my name. Because hota kya hai, if you carry out an assessment, then I am liable to make payment of tax on behalf of foreign company because I am treated as an agent. So assessment आपको करना है करो. I am not stopping you from doing assessment, but don't do in my hands. Do it in the hands of foreign company or the person who is actually an agent of a non-resident. I am not an agent. So on facts, if I am denying the liability, I'll file an appeal straight away. So पहले अगर ऑफिसर को असेसमेंट करना है तो पहले वो नोटिस इशू करता है 143(2) का. वो नोटिस इशू करेगा फॉरेन कंपनी के हैंड्स में. अभी फॉरेन कंपनी का इंडिया में तो कोई एड्रेस है ही नहीं और असेसमेंट में रिप्रेजेंट करने के लिए कोई तो चाहिए, लायबिलिटी पे करने के लिए कोई तो चाहिए. तो वो जनरली टारगेट करते हैं इंडिविजुअल्स को. दे ट्रीट देम एज एन एजेंट ऑफ नॉन रेसिडेंट. इट कैन बी अ कॉर्पोरेट एंटिटी ऑल्सो. So then that entity or person can raise the objection even before initiation of assessment. That appeal is a separate appeal which will lie before the CIT appeal. Having said that, now quite possible while your appeal is pending before CIT appeal, assessing officer will say, no, I am going to treat you as an agent and I'll carry out an assessment. Then he will parallelly carry out the other assessment. He will pass an order again in your name. That appeal will itself be a separate appeal. To be that matter is a separate against which you can file an appeal. So there will be two parallel matters. One, I file an appeal in my individual capacity saying I'm not an agent of NR. Second, I file either me or the company itself files an appeal before a CIT appeal on the quantum addition which he would have made. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. We'll go slow and I'll encourage everybody. See, the appeal mechanism, as I mentioned earlier, it is not relating to income tax only. You will see it in GST also. You'll see they call it differently in the company law also, in FEMA also. So everywhere there is an adjudication mechanism, even in the SEBI matters. Benami law, black money law, Insurance Act, Banking Regulation Act, RBI Act, whole series of laws that we have in India, everywhere there is an appeal mechanism or adjudication mechanism, and the principles are largely same. So once you understand the mechanism and you are comfortable with the drafting, then wonderful future awaits you. So the point is, I'll encourage everybody, even if the doubt is, a basic question, just throw at me so that I can, clear it right now, and you don't hold on to it, because most of the time what happens, if you keep your doubt within you, then the other things you may not be able to understand. There are a lot of sections which would be connected to each other. Like you can see under 246 capital A, there are a lot of other sections which I have to explain you first, and only then I can connect the dots. Form of appeal and prescribed fee. So every appeal shall be filed in the prescribed form and it will be verified in the prescribed manner. Form 35 is the specified form in which you have to file an appeal, and there are certain things which you have to attach with the appeal form. We'll see how to do that. We'll take you through a practical procedure. Prescribed fees. In case appeal is made to the commissioner appeal or joint commissioner appeal, there is no different fee prescribed. It is the same table. It is based on the addition or total income assessed. So you can see it in the table. I am not going to discuss this. But I'll ask you a question here after you go through this table. What will be the fees if the assessed income is a loss, or if the issue relates to penalty? These two issues. If the officer is levied a penalty, what would be the fees? I think your chat box is enabled now. You can put your questions or answers on BOS Live. So in case of a loss, or even in case where the issue involved is a penalty, then the last point, which is 250 rupees, is the amount of fees which you have to pay before you can file an appeal. Or likewise, if the issue involves like officer is treating me as an agent of a non-resident, I can file an appeal. It has nothing to do with the quantum. The amount of fees payable would be 250 rupees. By when do we have to file an appeal? 30 days. 30 days from where to be counted? In case the appeal relates to assessment or a penalty, then once the assessment is done or penalty is imposed, the officer will serve you three things: assessment order, demand notice, which will specify how much you have to pay or what is the amount refundable to you, and the third would be the computation sheet, which will would be an entire computation showing how much addition is made and how tax liability is computed. You have to file an appeal within a period of 30 days from the date of service of notice of demand. So when the demand notice is served, 30 days are to be reckoned from that date. In case the issue involved is any other case, the date on which 30 days from the date on which intimation or any other concerned order sought to be appealed against is served to you. Now this is interesting. Period to be excluded while computing 30 days in case of appeal relating to assessment or penalty. Under section 270 capital A, there is one exception provided. The date on which application is filed under 270 capital A, double A, and the date on which the order rejecting the application is served on the assessee, that much time has to be excluded. Now, just one simple question, Urvi or anybody else you would want to answer, whether you have already been, you have gone through the penalty provision. Has any faculty discussed the penalty chapter till date?
No, sir, we haven't done that.
Okay. So I think then I'll spend 5 minutes on this topic. So under the income tax law, there is one section 270 capital A. 270 capital A. It says that the assessing officer is authorized or he has a discretionary power to impose the penalty, and that penalty is levied for underreporting of income. Take for example, if the income as per return of income is 100, officer makes an addition of 500, assessed income is 600, and the 500 is the amount of addition. So while you will pay the amount of tax on the differential amount as well as the interest liability that will arise, officer will also impose a penalty. There are two kinds of penalty in that. One is underreporting of income, another is misreporting. If it is a case of underreporting, we pay 50% of tax sought to be evaded. Let's say your tax liability comes to 200 rupees, then the penalty to be imposed would be 50 rupees. Sorry, 100. And if the amount, if it is a case of misreporting, then you have, let's say, the tax liability of 200 rupees. In case of misreporting, you pay the double the amount of tax, that it comes to 400. So this is a broad idea about the penalty provision, underreporting and misreporting. Now what happens, the government thought that in case of an underreporting of income, if the assessee agrees to pay the tax liability along with the interest, in that case, we'll give you a complete waiver from the penalty, provided you file an application before the assessing officer. So there is a prescribed form in which you file an application before the officer. You say that, sir, I accept the addition. Whatever addition is made, I have paid the tax thereon along with the interest. And the most important condition, I have not filed an appeal. So if you have paid the tax with interest and if you have not filed the appeal before CIT appeal, that means you want to close the matter permanently. You file an application for immunity or a protection or a waiver from the penalty or even the prosecution under the Income Tax Act. Once the officer is receiving that application is filed under section 270 AA. Once the officer is receiving an application, he might either reject your application or he might accept your application. If he is accepting an application, that means that is the end of everything. The chapter is closed. There is no penalty on you. जो आपका असेसमेंट हुआ था, आपने टैक्स भी भर दिया ब्याज के साथ, कोई तरीके का अपील फाइल नहीं होगा. Now here we saw that appeal is to be filed within a period of 30 days from the date of service of notice of demand. Now what if, take an example, simple illustration, or let me see if I have that section with me, 270 capital A, then that would be great. No, I don't have. Just give me a minute. Okay, no problem. I'll explain it. So what we were discussing here, if the order is passed, demand is raised, penalty notice is issued, I can say, okay, hey, look, don't levy the penalty. I'm ready to pay the tax along with interest, provided it is not a case of misreporting. If it is a case of underreporting, I'll pay the tax, end of everything. Officer, let's say he accepts, then all closed. What if he denies? He says, no, I'm not going to accept it for whatever reason. We are not getting into reason right now. Then what happens? The 30 days time limit may expire because the officer is required to pass the order within a period of 30 days from the end of the month in which I make an application. So for example, if I make an application for immunity on 15th of January, officer can pass an order till 28th of February. That is the time limit prescribed under 270 AA. But then, see, for filing an appeal before CIT appeal, the time limit is only 30 days to be counted from the date on which the notice of demand is served to me. So if I make an application and tomorrow it is rejected, I may not be getting the benefit of filing an appeal because that time would have already gone. So to exclude the time between the date on which I file an application and the date on which the order rejecting the application is served to me, that has to be excluded. So if I take an example, let's say assessment order and demand notice, they are served to me on 15th of January 2025. I can file an appeal before CIT appeal within 30 days. So that will, let's say, expire on, for simple calculation, I'm not getting into exact date, but let's say 14th Feb 2025. By 14th Feb, I have to file an appeal. Now, what does 270 AA says? It talks about immunity from penalty. If the officer has made an addition of, let's say, 10 lakhs rupees, I have paid the tax of, let's say, 3 lakh, interest 1 lakh. So for me, I have paid everything. I have accepted that I'm not going to file an appeal till 14th of February. 15th of January is the date of receipt of notice. On 20th of January, I file an application for immunity before AO. Now, what is the timeline by which he has to dispose of? End of the month plus 30 days. So that comes, let's say, on 2nd of March. Just giving an illustration. Now my date of filing an appeal, last date is 14th of Feb. whereas the officer can pass an order until 2nd of March. So if I file an application and tomorrow it is rejected, I may not be better off from both the end. एक तो मेरा CIT appeal का टाइम भी चला गया और दूसरी तरीके से पेनल्टी का प्रोटेक्शन भी नहीं मिला. तो उस केस में डिपार्टमेंट the section says that the time period, date on which I file the application, date on which I file the application and date on which the order rejecting the application is served to me, that will be excluded, so that I am left with the sufficient time to file an appeal. So from 20th of January, let's say, till 2nd of March, that time you have to exclude. So effectively, I will still have more time to file an appeal. Tax to be paid at the time of filing an appeal. No appeal to the Joint Commissioner or Commissioner shall be admitted for consideration unless at the time of filing an appeal. If I have already filed the return of income, then I should have paid the tax on my returned income, not on the addition that the officer has made. Please, यहाँ पे काफी लोग गलती करते हैं. I don't have to pay a single penny for filing an appeal except the filing fees. But I have to ensure that if I have filed the return of income, I should have paid the tax which was due as per the return of income, because that is an accepted income or accepted tax liability. Alternatively, if I have not filed the return of income, in that situation, at least the amount of advance tax liability has been disposed of by me. In exceptional circumstances, the CIT appeal may waive the requirement of payment of tax. Simple. Now, some would argue that I have to make 20%. So practically what happens, the confusion sometimes arises that if I wish to file an appeal before CIT appeal, I have to pay 20% of tax demand. Only then I can file. Now, this concept of pre-deposit, I'm not getting into GST. It is not there in income tax law. It is not a condition precedent that to file an appeal, you have to pay 20% of tax demand. No. Both are two independent things. Appeal to CIT appeal is a different thing. You can file even without payment of tax or even by making 20 or 100%. There is a circular of CBDT which mandates that in case the assessment is carried out, during the course of assessment, additions are made. If you do not make accept the addition, you go to the appeal, but then you have to deposit 20%. But that is not a condition before you apply to the CIT appeal. 20% you have to pay. If you don't pay, you can still litigate on that, and even the officer also has a discretionary power to waive off that requirement. But then practically everybody does this thing. They file an appeal and then they pay the 20% of outstanding tax demand, either in installment or at lump sum. This is very simple to understand. Procedure in appeal. How do we file an appeal? Oh, sorry. Once you file an appeal, then what is the procedure? Just read it. It is self-explanatory, and then on the important points, I will discuss. Okay, so before discussing the procedure, should I show you some live process? Or if you have already seen, then we skip that part. Should I show you how the appeal is filed live? Anybody is interested, then put in the chat box. Otherwise, I'll feel you all are aware and you have done this.
So could you please show that? online file.
Okay, sure. Good. Just give me a minute. I'll share the screen after. Just let me know if the screen is visible. Yes.
सर स्क्रीन विजिबल है बट जूम का चैट तो अभी भी डिसेबल ही है, हम लोग चैट नहीं कर पा रहे हैं.
I'm really sorry. I don't know how to do it. But then there is a separate section on the website also. You can log in and.
यस सर, मैं एक्चुअली बॉस पोर्टल के थ्रू आपसे चैट कर रही हूँ इस समय.
You can do it through that. I'm seeing that very frequently. So
ओके
don't worry about it, or you can raise the hand. There's no problem.
ओके सर. ओके.
Yeah. So this is an income tax website. While we don't have any matter to file an appeal, I'll just show you how the process works. So I'm putting my PAN number and right. So this is an income tax website. We go to e-file, income tax form. So appeal is to be filed online. Income tax form. We see file income tax. Click on file income tax form. So there you will see in the last section, you just have to, okay. So here in the search box, just type form 35. So you will see appeals, form 35, appeal to the joint commissioner or commissioner. Both are sort of, is a common platform for both. There's no separate platform. So here you can see appeal filing mode online and it is compulsory. I select the assessment year. Let's say assessment year 22-23 का order आया है. So I select that year. I continue. Let's get started. So here you will see there are two options. One is file appeal for an order without DIN. File appeal for an order with DIN. Order issued after 1st October 29. So DIN is nothing but document identification number. If you have that document identification number, you select option 2, otherwise you select option 1. So in my case, let's say I'm not having that. So then I have to answer some other questions like section and subsection under which I'm filing an appeal. So here you can see whatever we discussed is already mentioned. All those sections which we came across. Like for example, order passed under 143.3. Read with 147. So you select this. You let's say put your DIN number 1, 2, 3, 4, or even the order number alternatively. So I put some dummy number. I select the date on which order is passed. Let's say it was passed on 22nd Jan. And then it is specifically asking me service of order because the date to be counted is from the date of service of order. So I go ahead. They are saying there is no matching data count because that is true. But in any case, I wish to proceed. Now you can see form 35 on the screen. Form 35 on the screen, you can see wherein I have to put in these details. For example, my basic detail, it will have name, address, mobile number, email ID, everything. Then order against which appeal is filed. This is important section. So I can select assessment year. This is the order which I already populated earlier. So it is getting auto-selected. Order number, all these dates will come automatically. Then my jurisdictional assessing officer I have to mention. I save it. I come back to home page. Pending appeal. I have to specify whether any other appeal for other year is already pending. If it is yes, I have to put in the detail. Let's say there is no other pending appeal. So I say no. Appeal detail. So here I have to select section and subsection of the act under which appeal is preferred. If the appeal is relating to assessment, answer is yes. Then I have to put in what are the amount of addition or amount of loss which is denied, amount of disallowance which is disputed in appeal, amount of disputed demand, nil in case of loss. So these are all addition amount that I have to put in simple. And you remember we discussed there is a different appeal filing fee if it is an addition or normal assessment, or if it is a penalty or other case. So if it is not a case of assessment but a penalty, then I select not applicable. And in penalty section, I can select yes, and then give the details of penalty, amount of penalty as per order, and amount of penalty which you are disputing in appeal, right? So let's say it is a case of assessment, or if it is neither, then I select no in both the situation. But here, let's say it is assessment, amount of income assessed, let's say 10 lakh. Addition is, let's say this, whatever it is. Loss 0, 0. Disputed amount is this. Then I save this detail. Details of taxes paid. Again, the condition which we discussed. Am I liable to pay tax whether I have filed the return, whether a return has been filed by assessee in connection with the appeal, whether tax has been paid. We just discussed. I have to say yes and give the number of the return acknowledgement number, date on which I filed the return, and taxes which I have paid. Otherwise, I can select not applicable. And likewise, if no return is filed, accordingly, I have to put in the information. If the appeal relates to any TDS, then whether I have paid the TDS due or not, that I have to specify here, right? Then statement of facts, grounds of appeal, and additional evidence. This is pending for our discussion, but just to summarize, I have to mention the facts, what was the issue involved, what are the submissions which I have filed, grounds of appeal, on what grounds I am challenging the addition, and is there any additional evidence. Additional evidence is something which is, let's say, the assessing officer, I have not filed a particular document before AO, but I am filing it before the CIT appeal. That is called as an additional evidence. It is filed under Rule 46, and it is compulsory to specify or seek a permission before filing an additional evidence. Then at last, appeal filing detail. Whether there is a delay in filing of appeal. If I say yes, there is a delay, then I have to give the request for condonation of delay. If there is no delay, then simply say no. Appeal filing fee paid. So if you have paid the appeal filing fee, then put the details of challan, BSR code, date of payment, and amount of payment, etc. And lastly, attachment. So what is compulsory to attach? ये आपको मच्छर दिख रहा है यहाँ पे? This is compulsory. So copy of order or intimation appealed against. So the order of assessment or intimation is to be attached compulsory. Notice of demand. These are two mandatory things. Others are optional, like documentary evidence in case you rely upon any evidence. If there is any additional evidence you want to furnish, or any other attachment like challan copy or any submission. Then finally, form of verification and submission. So this is the appeal mechanism. So I'll now see if there is. Okay, so you can put your chat question in chat box now. Student may be eligible to access that. Just give me a moment. I'll share the screen. So far, good. Any query? All right. So in case any query, please raise your hand and we can discuss. Yes, please.
Sorry, just
Sorry, I'm not able to hear you.
no, there was some connection issue on my side. Sir, in this section which we did, appealable orders before CIT appeals, we did not get a line, whereas if an order is passed under section 144, best judgment assessment, we had that in joint commissioner appeals, but we did not have it here. Is there a specific reason?
Okay, let me. Which one are you referring to?
Best judgment order under section.
So if the order is passed under 144, then you can definitely file an appeal before the CIT appeal. There's no restriction on that.
Okay, I think I understand. Okay. And so one more thing, while in the prescribed fees paragraph, it is said that irrespective of the date of initiation of the assessment proceedings, like in that para, here in this. So what is the meaning of this irrespective of the date of initiation of the assessment proceedings?
It's just a simple way of, like, in case of an appeal made to the commissioner appeal, irrespective of date of initiation of assessment proceeding, the appeal shall be accompanied by a fee of. So it has no any significant meaning as such. Just you may focus on the amount of fees that you have to pay. It's just a manner of saying, okay, whenever the assessment proceedings were initiated, that we are least concerned, you have to pay this much fees.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we are done with timeline. We are done with exclusion. We are done with the taxes to be paid at the time of filing an appeal. We have read a little bit about procedure. So procedure is like this. You file an appeal. After some period of time, the Commissioner of Income Tax Appeal will fix a date and place for hearing of the appeal. Practically, they ask you to file a written submission also. And once the date is fixed, you file a written submission and you seek an opportunity to present yourself before the officer. Now, you can either appear in person, assessee can appear in person, or through an AR. I think by now you should be aware of what is AR and who can be appointed as an AR. We have discussed that in previous session. He has the power to adjourn the hearing of appeal. अगर आपको बुखार है, अगर कोई reason से आप बाहर हो, or whatever may be the genuine reason, you can file an application for adjournment. Short adjournment may be granted once or twice on genuine cases, and matter may be adjourned to subsequent. Adjourn is nothing but seeking an extra time to appear or to file some document as called for by the Commissioner Appeal. So you can seek an adjournment. Before passing an order, officer has a power to ask and seek further information from you, and he may carry out inquiry as may be relevant to the facts of the case or the matter at hand. And in fact, he can also pass a direction to AO to make the further inquiry in this matter. Now, so as we saw when we were seeing that live uploading, there was two attachment, two information which you have to put in. One was two sections. One was relating to statement of facts, where you describe all the facts. उसमें आप सब बता दोगे कि सर मैंने return file किया, assessing officer issued a notice to me on so and so date. In the notice, he asked me these detail. I gave him these detail. He further asked these detail. I further gave him these detail. And then finally, he made an addition. And in the grounds of appeal, you specify the grounds, the basis, the reasons why the addition made by the officer is wrong or baseless or against the principle of law. Say, for example, if the officer is treating a particular income which is not taxable as per the assessee, but he's treating as a taxable receipt. So you can say, my first ground in relation to this addition is officer is erred in law and treating the income as a taxable receipt. Second ground, officer has not provided me opportunity of being heard. Like, for example, he passed an addition, made an addition without calling me, or even without giving me opportunity to present my case. So you can take this as grounds. So against one addition, you can have multiple grounds. Not necessary that you have to have a multiple ground. It can be a single ground also. That would suffice. Then you can see in para 5, the CIT appeal may allow appellant to go into any ground of appeal which are not previously raised by the appellant if he is satisfied that the omission was not willful or unreasonable. Say, for example, I file an appeal. In the same example, I raised only one ground. That, sir, as per so-and-so provision, this expense is allowable to me. Now, when the case is to be presented before the CIT appeal, let's say there is a development, and as per that development, my ground is weaker, and it is quite possible that I may not be able to succeed before the CIT appeal. That point of time, if I come across any other ground, like for example, if I read the order and I see that officer did not grant me opportunity, or the order was passed on 31st March, last date to pass an order, and show cause notice was issued on 30th of March, just one day. So effectively, I was given only 1 day's time to represent, which is impossible. So he passed an ex parte order. This ground, you can raise it even if you have not mentioned in your appeal memo. This is about raising of an additional ground before the CIT appeal after filing an appeal. This is permissible but subject to the discretion of CIT appeal. Likewise, for example, if an assessee has claimed an expenditure, officer calls for the evidence of expenditure. Like for example, aapne mobile kharida. You claim the depreciation on mobile. Officer said, you give me the bill and evidence relating to put to use of the phone. You fail to provide the bill. Officer ne depreciation disallow kar di. Now you are in appeal. Now before CIT appeal, you file an appeal, but you produce the invoice of purchase of mobile at the time of hearing. Now CIT appeal will naturally ask you why you did not produce it before the income tax officer. Because had you produced, आपका matter वहीं पे ही खत्म हो जाता, addition होता ही नहीं. So that is called as production of additional evidence. That is permissible provided you are able to justify. There are certain situations we will see as we move ahead, wherein only in those circumstances you can produce an additional evidence. Like for example, I'll just narrate when you can produce an additional evidence. If you want to note down, you can note down. Where the AO has, during the course of assessment, he has refused to accept any document as an evidence. Where I was prevented by sufficient cause to produce an additional evidence. I think this is not part of the study material, so I'm just taking it up separately. Where the assessee was prevented by sufficient cause from producing before the AO any evidence which is relevant to the grounds of appeal. So there was a reasonable and bona fide situation. I was prevented. For example, document misplaced ho gaya. I don't know where it is. Mera accountant resign karke chala gaya. So I don't know where he has kept the accounting records. I was sick. I could not produce at that point of time. So I'm now producing it. So these are all justifiable reasons, bona fide reasons, which you can sort of explain to the CIT appeal and he will allow you. Now this is important. In point number 7, you can see the timeline. In every appeal, the joint commissioner or commissioner, where it is possible, he may hear and decide the appeal within a period of 1 year from the end of the year in which such appeal is filed before him under 246 or transfer under 246 capital A, as the case may be. Now here, what is important to note here is where it is possible. This wording is also there in the section. So don't get carried away by the timeline that he has to dispose of the appeal within 1 year. No. Wherever it is possible. So the timeline given is not a mandatory timeline, it is a directory. As against assessment, the assessment has to be completed within the prescribed time. If it is not completed, the assessment becomes time barred. That means invalid. Whereas in case of CIT appeal, if the officer concerned is not hearing the appeal or disposing of the appeal within 1 year, it is still valid. He can continue and he can practically they sit on the matter for a prolonged meter of time because of the large pendency. So the usage of the word is wherever it is possible. Then 256B empowers the government to make a scheme for the purpose of quick disposal of appeal by CIT appeal to impart greater efficiency, transparency, and accountability. So this is nothing but talking about the faceless scheme of things. Any query? So I think we'll quickly close this CIT appeal chapter so that we can move to Itat, and then we'll take a break after immediate closure of this chapter. So this is about the faceless appeal mechanism. The section 250 subsection 6B is an enabling provision whereby the central government can come out with a notification in the official gazette, and they may say that for the purpose of disposal of appeal and to impart greater efficiency, transparency, and accountability, they may bring in the faceless appeal. जैसे कि we discussed earlier. Phone paper. Okay. Sorry for the disturbance. So, for example, previously the appeals were heard in a face-to-face manner, wherein the officer calls you in their office, you go and hearing opportunity is given, you present your document, you present your arguments before the commissioner appeal, physically set up. And now, because of the technological advancement, it has moved to the faceless, wherein you don't have to physically appear. All the arguments can be made online, just like the Zoom call. There is a separate platform. But the only change is you won't be able to see who the officer is. There are certain exceptions, like example, where the transfer pricing additions are involved, or where the matter is relating to search assessment. Search is carried out, where it is difficult to deal with the matter completely in a faceless manner. You need the presence of the person, or in a situation where cross-examination is required. In those cases, the assessment and appeal is still being carried out in a face-to-face manner. Otherwise, it has gone to faceless system. Now, powers of Joint Commissioner or Commissioner of Income Tax appeals. What are the powers? When an appeal is filed, the Commissioner appeal, he may either confirm the addition, he may reduce the amount of adjustment or addition. He can even make an enhancement. So if the officer has made an addition of 1 lakh, on the very same issue, he can make it 2 lakhs. Or cancellation or annulment of the assessment. He can reduce it, enhance it, sustain it or confirm it, or he can sort of cancel the assessment. These are the powers. So this is important from 1st October 24 in the last budget. The government brought in an amendment in section 251 to say that in an order of assessment under section 144, that is best judgment assessment, the Commissioner of Income Tax Appeal, he may also set aside an assessment and refer the case back to the AO for making fresh assessment. Now, please understand there is a difference. In earlier part, we discussed that, no, I think you have Okay. So let me give a brief once again, if not discussed. So there are two things. One is set aside. Another is calling for remand report. Say, for example, you have gone through an assessment. You have filed an appeal. Now, when you file an appeal, you know already what are the powers of officer. He can confirm it, reduce it, enhance it, or cancel it. These four powers are there. But then, in the previous section, procedure of appeal, we read that he may make further inquiry, he thinks fit, or he may even direct the officer to make a further inquiry and result the report of same to the CIT appeal concern. Now, this is nothing but calling for the further information, directing for inquiry or remand report. This is possible if there is any issue, if there is any fact which needs to be examined. He can say, okay, I'm referring it back to the CIT appeal only for that limited purpose and calling for the report from the officer concerned. This is seeking the further information. Whereas now, if he is calling for the remand report, the assessment is not set aside. Whereas in this budget, they have given a power to the Commissioner of Income Tax Appeal to set aside an assessment. Set aside means completely putting aside the assessment order passed by the officer as good as quashing it. It has no validity. But at the same time, he will direct or refer the assessment back to the officer for carrying out a fresh assessment. But then there is a condition. The crucial condition, order which has been subject matter of appeal should have been passed under 144. It is only in case of ex parte assessment, CIT appeal can refer the matter back to the assessing officer. I mean, he can set aside the order and refer it and then ask for a fresh assessment. When he's asking for a fresh assessment, there will be a fresh opportunity to be granted to the assessee. What if the order is passed under 143.3 or 147? In that case, CIT appeal has still no power to set aside and ask for a fresh assessment. Why so? Because the order is passed only after dealing with the assessee. Assessee is cooperated. There is no ex parte order. In 144, it was an ex parte order without hearing the other party. So CIT appeal says, okay, I'm setting aside, and then let the officer carry out fresh assessment as if nothing has happened, and then we'll look into the matter. Then, point 2, in an appeal against an order imposing a penalty, he may either confirm or he may cancel or he may vary it in a way he likes. And lastly, in any other case, he may pass such order as he deems fit. Like wherever there is neither an issue of penalty nor an issue of quantum addition, he can direct as he deems fit. Like treating the assessee as an agent of a non-resident. Those cases are covered. What is not within the powers of CIT appeal? The CIT appeal is not empowered to enhance the assessment or a penalty or reduce a refund due to the assessee without giving the assessee a reasonable opportunity. So wherever there is anything being done which is against the assessee, he has to give the opportunity. He cannot straight away do anything without hearing or listening to the assessee. In disposing of the appeal, the Commissioner may consider or decide any matter arising out of proceeding in which the order appealed against was passed, even if such matter was not raised before the appeal or the Commissioner appeal, as the case may be. Now, this is very, very interesting and important. Say, for example, we'll see some judgments also. If you file a return of income, the return is processed, assessment is made, you go to CIT appeal. You forgot to claim a particular deduction. Let's say you made an investment under LIC. It was eligible for deduction under ATC. You forgot to claim in the return. In the assessment also, you forgot to raise this point. Can you put it before CIT appeal? The answer is yes. In disposing of the appeal, the CIT appeal may allow you to raise any additional ground or even any additional claim. There are debatable views on that. We'll see some of the case laws later on. So I think we are done with this chapter. If you have got any query for the discussion we have had so far, we can discuss. Otherwise, we can take a break of, I think, 10 to 15 minutes and then connect back. Anything? one question is, what do you mean by immunity? Immunity means protection, relief.
Sir, okay. In point number 11, procedure in appeal, in that point number 5, it says that the joint commissioner or commissioner appeals may also allow the applicant to go into any grounds of appeal not specified previously by the applicant. And now, in the powers of joint commissioner, in disposing of an appeal, he may decide on any matter arising out of the proceedings in which the order appealed against was passed. I'm getting a little confused in these two.
Okay, so one is you are saying in point 5. So point 5 is simply saying if there is any addition, and in relation to that addition you have raised one ground, but then subsequently, if you wish to raise, like when we file the appeal, we have to specify the ground, like this is the addition, this is the ground, and we have to describe it why you are challenging the addition. But then subsequently you was to raise additional ground, koi judgment aa gaya Supreme Court ka, High Court ka, and you want to rely on that decision and you want to quote that as a ground of appeal. That is a subsequent development. So you can always take a liberty that I'm raising this additional ground. Please adjudicate on this. This is the purpose of this point 5, right?
Okay, sir.
Now, second point, what you mentioned was in point number 12, last one, in disposing of the appeal, he may consider and decide any matter arising out of the proceeding in which the order appealed against was passed, even if such matters were not raised before the CIT appeal as case may be. This means we have not raised anything in the grounds of appeal or in relation to addition, but we can still put that point. So the earlier one was in relation to an issue which is described in appeal and the ground thereto. Here we are not talking about that issue. We are saying if there is anything out of context, you can still put before the CIT appeal and he will have to dispose of the matter. Consider at least. He might reject, not necessarily he will adjudicate, but then you can always put that point.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah. So we can go for break for 10 minutes and then I'll give you additional 5 minutes. Just go through whatever we have discussed, and if there is any query or question that you have, we can connect after 10 minutes. Okay, so by the time everyone joins, we'll take 2 more minutes, and if we have any questions, we can take up. Please raise your hand so that we can unmute you, or you can put in the chat box also. All right. So next in line is appeals to the appellate tribunal, income tax appellate tribunal, or ITAT as we call it. So first is the constitution of the ITAT. It is the central government that is empowered to constitute an appellate tribunal, which will consist of judicial members and accountant members to exercise the power and discharge the functions conferred on the tribunal by the Income Tax Act. So there are 2 categories of members. So till now we have seen that in the hierarchy we have assessing officer, which can be ITO, ACIT, DCIT. Then we have at the first appellate level, we have joint commissioner appeal and the commissioner appeals. But then once the order is passed by the commissioner appeal, and if you are still aggrieved by the order of CIT appeal, you can file an appeal before the ITAT. Now, the ITAT has its own constitution. Commissioner does not sit at the Itat level. It consists of judicial member and the accountant member. If it is only a single member who is hearing the matter, we call it single member bench. If there are 2 members, like accountant and judicial member sitting on a bench, then we call it a division member bench. And then if there are more than 2, and on the recommendation of the president, special bench is constituted, we call it as a special bench. So what are the orders? So just like we discussed in case of CIT appeal, it is only the specific orders against which you can file an appeal. In case of ITAT also, you can approach Itat only if you are aggrieved by the specified orders. What are those orders? Just see. So similar tonnage tax scheme, then normal 143.3 and 147. So I think those who are not aware about the tonnage tax scheme and all, I'm not putting so much of time, but that's a special taxation scheme for the shipping companies, and we're not getting into it. But then any issue arising out of a particular section 115 EZZ, that would be subject matter of appeal before Itat. Then normal order passed under 143.3 or 147. So order is passed under 143.3, then appeal lies to joint commissioner appeals or the CIT appeal. But then if you recollect, we read an exception if it is in pursuance of directions of DRP. If the order is passed by AO based on directions of DRP, or the order is passed under section 154, again pursuant to directions of DRP. Please do not mix up 2 things. If rectification under 154 is carried out in the normal situation, other than an order which has been subject matter of DRP direction, then you have to approach CIT appeal. But if there is any assessment order passed by AO based on directions of DRP and any rectification carried out by AO in that order which is passed pursuant to directions of DRP, both of them will be subject matter of appeal before Itat only. You cannot approach the CIT appeal or any other authority. So likewise, any order passed under section 250 by the commissioner appeal, irrespective of subject matter of appeal, that would be appealable before the ITAT. Say for example, you filed an appeal before CIT appeal. it was a belated appeal. You did not file it on time. Within 30 days, you could not present the appeal. When the matter came for hearing, CIT appeal dismissed it. He said that since the appeal is not filed on time, it is not a valid appeal. Accordingly, he is passing an order that I'm not going to entertain this appeal. What does that signify? What is the remedy available to you? So there are two thoughts on that. One is, in some of the decision, the courts have held that if the CIT appeal does not adjudicate the matter or does not entertain an appeal merely because it has been filed belatedly or for any other reason, that actually results into confirming the action of AO. Whatever additions AO has made, it is deemed that CIT appeal is confirming the addition made by the AO because he is dismissing your appeal without listening to the matter. In that case, the order of rejection is as good as an order passed under section 250. Even that is also appealable before the Itat, right? And the another school of thought is when they say that if the CIT appeal does not entertain an appeal and you have effectively and expressly no alternate remedy against that dismissal, you can file a writ petition before the High Court. That is not coming out of income tax law. That is a separate jurisprudence. I'm just sharing for the knowledge purpose. If the CIT is rejecting your appeal because it was not filed on time, you can still approach the High Court by way of a writ petition if the tribunal is not entertaining your appeal. But the first preference should always be given to the alternate remedy, because when you approach High Court will always say, have you exhausted your alternate remedy? And then you are coming to us. Again, please note, we are not filing an appeal before High Court. It is a writ petition, which is different. A writ petition is filed under the Constitution of India, Article 226, whereas the tax appeal is filed before High Court under the income tax law. Both are different things. 270 capital A. If the order is passed under section 270 capital A by the assessing officer, the appeal will lie before the CIT appeal. But here we are talking about imposition of penalty by the commissioner appeal. In that case, the appeal will lie to ITAT. And if you read section 270 capital A, both assessing officer as well as CIT appeal both have power to impose the penalty. Now my question to you is whether CIT appeal can impose the penalty. What he has mentioned here is, what we have mentioned here is the power to okay, so it is an enabling provision where you can approach the ITAT. But then whether CIT appeal can impose the penalty under suit 270 capital A? Yes. And in fact, you can even make an enhancement to the addition which the AO has made, because we read in the previous section the powers of CIT appeal. So you can approach the ITAT directly. So any penalty imposed by CIT appeal is subject matter of appeal before Itat. We are not discussing individual. Any order rectifying a mistake. Now 154 rectification order need not be passed by AO. Even the CIT appeal can pass an order. And if he is passing such order, which is resulting into any kind of tax demand or any adverse action on the assessee, he can file an appeal before Itat. Order imposing levy of interest and penalty in certain specified cases as referred to in 158 BFA, or again any kind of penalty imposed by CIT appeal. Likewise, these are penalty and quantum. Now we will come upon certain other provisions. 12AA and 12AB. Are we all thorough with the 12A, 12BB, or is it still pending? Taxation of charitable trust. Are we all clear on that? Can somebody put a quick confirmation? Yes, great. So if you all have done, then it is very easy to understand. 12AA is nothing but granting of approval to the charitable trust to claim the exemption if the income is applied for this specific purpose. So if you apply to the, so before claiming an exemption, the trust or the charitable trust has to file an application in a prescribed form before the commissioner. commissioner, not the commissioner appeals. Both are different. The commissioner will grant an approval under 12AA or 12AB or even under 80G to the trust. If the commissioner does not grant an approval, then you can file an appeal before ITAT. That does not necessarily mean that demand has been there and you can file because demand has been raised. No, even rejection of approval will allow you to file an appeal before ITAT. Revision of erroneous order passed by assessing officer. We will soon be discussing this in some time. (263) order, and even the approval under section 1023C, if it has been denied, then you can file an appeal before ITAT. Now see, ITAT is a second level of appellate authority. If, let's say, AO makes an addition, the addition is deleted by CIT appeal, or partially it has been sustained and partially it has been directed to be deleted. So there is either a complete relief or it is a partial relief situation. Now, what happens if it is a complete relief to the assessee? In that case, the department or the assessing officer gets an opportunity to file the appeal before ITAT. So if you are not going in appeal because you have got a relief, your addition is deleted, but now the department is aggrieved by the relief which you have received, they can go to the ITAT and file an appeal. So 252 provides that the commissioner may, again please note, it is not the commissioner appeal, it is the commissioner or the principal commissioner, as the case may be, if he is objecting to the order passed by the appellate authority, either under 154, that is by way of rectification, or by way of disposal of the appeal, they may direct the assessing officer, the junior officer in rank, to appeal to the appellate tribunal against such order. Now, what if the addition is partially sustained and partially it has been deleted? If it is a partial relief, then it is a win-win, as in the sense it is partly in favor and partly against the assessee. Or alternatively, if it is completely in favor of assessee and department is preferring an appeal, what is it as an assessee I have to do? In that case, I can file the memorandum of cross objection. So it is also one form of appeal only, but in a sense that if someone else has filed an appeal against me, in that case, I should have an opportunity to file a counter to that. A counter to that is nothing but the cross objection. I am raising my objection against the appeal which has been filed by the department, and on each of the issues, I will describe my grounds. Time limit. So there has been an amendment in the last budget on the timeline to file an appeal. Previously, the appeal before ITAT could be filed within 60 days from the date on which the order which has been subject matter of appeal before the lower authorities communicated either to the assessee or to the commissioner. The timeline was 60 days. It was to be counted from the date of communication to me or to the to the assessee or to the department. But then post-budget, they have made a slight change. They are saying now it would be, instead of 60 days, it would be 2 months, and they are to be counted from the end of the month in which the order is communicated. So for example, earlier, the timeline was if the order is communicated to me, let's say on 15th of June, or let's say on 15th of January, then you have to count 60 days from the date of communication. Now, you have to count it, you have to apply 2 months formula, but then you have to count it from the end of the month in which order is communicated. So from 31st January, you will count 2 months. So the last day would be effectively 31st of March. If the order is received on 1st March, 1st January, let's say, then the appeal can be filed by 31st March. 2 months from the end of the month in which order is communicated. So effectively you get 3 months. So date of service of order and date of communication both are same. There is not much difference. Service means order is served to you. Communication means order is communicated to you. Now the manner of communication, I think we have already discussed in the miscellaneous chapter, wherein we saw that how they have to serve it, how they have to communicate. These days, it has moved completely everything to the online. So everything, like for example, CIT appeal order, you file appeal online, your hearing is online, the order is dropped in your mailbox as well as in your login credential. Whenever it is dropped in your mailbox, it is deemed to have been communicated to you, and likewise it is deemed to be served to you. Okay, so can department also file memorandum of cross objection? I file an appeal before Itat. Department can also file. So yes, the opportunity is available both to the department as well as to the assessee. But the timeline for filing the cross objection is different. It is 30 days from the date of receipt of notice against any part of such order. So 30 days timeline for cross objection. Or even allow the filing of cross objection be latent. Or in other words, what is the sufficient cause? Say for example, the appeal is to be filed online even in case of ITAT. It is accepted in physical paper mode also, but then they allow online filing also. If there is any kind of situation like COVID-19, so you have got a sufficient cause, medical emergency, or for example, technical glitch on the website, or for example, non-availability of consultant in your area. So all these are the some of the grounds on which the condonation application can be filed before ITAT and it might be accepted. But then there is usually a separate hearing and procedure that one has to go through before it is accepted. Fees for filing appeal before ITAT. So you can see on the table, and if you have any query, then we can discuss now. Yes.
In this fees, it is given where the total income of the assessee as computed by the assessing officer. But in case if you are filing an appeal against the order of Joint Commissioner Appeals or Commissioner Appeals, then and if they have increased our income, then how will this, then which income will be taken as the base? That's my question.
Okay. Just give me a minute. I'll just open the bare section also, so that the things are completely clear. So, as the language suggests, Commissioner has a power to make an enhancement, but in any case, for computation of fees for filing appeal before ITAT, one has to refer to the assessment order only.
Okay.
And alternatively, there is one concept of power of CIT appeal, which is coterminous to the power of assessing officer. That is in different context, but one may conservatively, for example, if the officer is making an addition of, let's say, only 5,000 rupee, but then CIT appeal is making an addition of 2 lakh rupees or even more than that, then the question arises, do I follow the limit and apply the limit to the action of AO or to the CIT appeal? One needs to apply conservatively and compute the income which has been practically, just to avoid the rejection by the ITAT, one can definitely take into account, because what happens when CIT appeal is passing the order, the matter is remanded to the officer for passing an appeal effect order, right? Or he passes an order to give effect to the CIT appeal. So the order is merged ultimately, or even vice versa is also possible. So you can take either of the approach. If you want to follow conservative approach, just see what is the addition made by CIT appeal, and based on that you can do. But the language of law is this, what you are seeing on the screen. You have to see the limit as per the assessment order.
Okay. Which is given passed by assessing
Yes.
officer.
Yes, yes. So in all penalty cases or other than quantum cases, it is 500. So point number 5, where is appeal is filed to the tribunal by an AO on the direction of commissioner, no fees. There is no fee on the department. Interesting. Application for stay of demand, 500. So you can also file a stay petition before tribunal and a prescribed form, and the fees is also prescribed. So I think there will be a separate chapter on the stay of demand, so not spending additional time on that. Scheme for appeal to appellate tribunal. So likewise, what was discussed in the course of during your sessions on assessment, and what we discussed in CIT appeal, the concept of faceless or the electronic appeal. The same enabling provision is also introduced in the scheme of things when appeal relates to ITAT. But then it has not yet been implemented. Faceless ITAT is very difficult to conceptualize as such. So government has not yet notified anything as such. But yes, the procedure has been prescribed where you can file the appeal online. But hearing of the appeal is still happening physical, face-to-face, as well as virtual, but face-to-face. So after giving opportunity to both the parties, tribunal will pass an order. So it is a hearing opportunity. Why both the parties? Because appeal to the tribunal can be filed by assessee as well as by department, anyone who is aggrieved. And additionally, even if department or assessee is not aggrieved in either of the situation, they can file the cross objection. And then after hearing both the parties, the order is to be passed by the ITAT. Rectification. So if there is any mistake apparent on record, same language which you have already seen in section 154, if there is a mistake apparent from record, the tribunal may, within 6 months from the end of the month in which order is passed. So the time limit provided under 154 is probably longer as compared to time limit provided in this section. It is only 6 months from the end of the month in which order is passed. The principle, which is mistake apparent from record, what does it mean or signify, which is discussed, or the judicial precedents which you might have come across in relation to 154, they would equally apply in this section as well. Again, if the rectification results into enhancement of addition, reduction of refund, reduction of loss, or in any way it increases the liability of the assessee, then again, before even rectification, the tribunal has to give an opportunity of being heard. So again, the time limit to dispose of the appeal, they have used the word wherever it is possible. Wherever it is possible, the tribunal will hear the matter and decide the appeal within a period of 4 years from the end of the financial year in which appeal is filed. Again, it is directory, it is not mandatory. This is also important. I'm not sure whether you have already been discussed this stay chapter, but we'll touch upon it. Under 254 2A, the appellate tribunal can grant you the stay of demand of tax, but the condition is that stay can extend only up to 180 days from the date of granting of such stay, subject again to the condition that assessee deposits not less than 20% of tax, interest, fee, penalty, or any other sum as the case may be. So whatever appeal is pending, if it is quantum appeal, then pay 20% of tax and interest. If it is a penalty appeal, pay 20% of appeal, the demand raised, and then tribunal will grant you the stay against the recovery of balance demand. But again, that is conditional that the stay will be valid only for a period of 180 days. In case of CIT appeal, as we discussed earlier, there is no time limit. If you deposit 20%, then the department usually grants you stay till the time appeal is disposed of. So it is indefinite time limit. If the appeal is disposed of, let's say after 10 years, you don't have to pay 80% balance demand till the time appeal is disposed of. Whereas in case of Itat, the power of tribunal to grant the stay is only up to 180 days. Then there is another rule. No extension of stay. Can the tribunal extend if the matter is not heard or decided before or within the expiry of 180 days? In that case, the law says where the appeal is not disposed of within the specified period. In that case, unless the assessee makes an application and is complied with the condition of depositing of 20%, and the tribunal is satisfied that जो delay हुआ 180 days में appeal dispose of नहीं हुआ, that is not attributable to the assessee, then वो ज़्यादा stay दे सकता है. It can be additional by 30 days, 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, or at the max, in overall, it will not exceed 365 days. And the tribunal has to dispose of the appeal within the periods of stay so granted or allowed. So simple to understand. आपने appeal file किया. You have filed appeal. That means the matter has been held against you by CIT appeal. If the CIT appeal goes against you, the tax officer will immediately issue a recovery notice because they have won the case at first level. But then you will say, okay, hey, look, my appeal is pending before ITAT. Give me the stay. So if he doesn't grant you a stay, you go to Itat. Itat will say, okay, pay 20%. Within 180 days, the Itat is supposed to dispose of the matter because recovery is put on hold. And if the ITAT fails to dispose of the matter within 180 days, and the delay in disposal of matter is not because of me, because of any other circumstance, then tribunal can extend the stay, but that extension cannot in any case exceed 365 days. So you can read. Clear? Let us say even after 365 days, if the order is not passed or the matter is not yet disposed of and it is pending before ITAT, then the stay will stand vacated, right? After the expiry of such period or period as may be specified, even if delay in disposing is not attributable to the assessee. Now there is one interesting case law on this issue. We'll discuss that case law once we sort of complete the other things. But then there are some exceptions wherein the court has held that this even 365-day period is not mandatory. It is directory in nature, provided if the delay is not attributable to me. So that means even we'll read 365 days to have an extended period of time. It can still be extended if delay is not because of fault of assessee. If delay is because of, let's say, department keeps on taking adjournment and my matter is not coming on board and it is coming, but then it is getting adjourned. In that case, who is at fault? Department is at fault. So the court says in such a case, we will reread this provision and we will say that if the delay is not attributable to the assessee, then this time limit shall not apply, or it will apply with such modification. We'll see that case law later with facts. Cost of appeal. Now this is interesting. Cost of any appeal to the appellate tribunal shall be at the discretion of the tribunal. Now sometimes what happens when the matter is disposed of at that point of time, tribunal may award a cost. For example, if I am at loss, for whatever reason, it may direct the department to pay certain amount to the assessee, or likewise, it is called as avoiding of cost. Same power is available even to the High Court and Supreme Court, but not to the CIT appeal. CIT appeal cannot avoid any cost. This is the most important final fact-finding authority. Anybody wants to try? What does this mean? With an example. What do we mean by final fact-finding authority or final authority on facts? Anyone came across this term during your internship? Yes, so we have one hand. Yes, please.
Yes, sir. I think I have read somewhere that question of law raised in the High Court, and it is the highest authority on question of fact that can be raised.
Okay, good attempt. Any example you want to discuss? One more, yes. Any example you would want to provide? Just for the benefit of all, otherwise answer is correct.
Means I think that fact is something which cannot be, appealed further. This is a fact. If I like here, Itat can only is the final fact-finding authority. For example, if there is a dispute which is going on against, or there is an appeal which is filed for a matter, like for example, classification of a machinery. Okay, like the assessee company has claimed a higher rate of depreciation, claiming it to be a certain type of classification. Like they have claimed it as 40%, that this machinery should be 40%. And according to the department, the department classifies the machinery to be depreciated at a rate of 15%. This can be an example of fact-based.
Okay, good attempt. Any other attempt? Nice attempt. We all are on right direction. So, there is a very, in the same example, if I put it, for example, on a particular plant and machinery, there are two rates, and there is a debate whether the item is, in the same example which you gave, eligible for 15% or 40%. ITAT will decide on the facts. What rate would be applicable? It is a question of law. What is the usage of that item? For example, take the example of hypothetical example of a computer. The argument is tablet, iPad. Is it a computer or is it a mobile? Say, for example, on computer, the depreciation allowable is 40%. And let's assume for mobile phone, it is 15%. If I have got an iPad, I'm using it for my business purpose. The question arises, is it a computer? Is it a mobile phone? That is the question. If you say it is a phone, then 15%, because iPad has an option that you can put a SIM card also and use it like a telecommunication device. But at the same time, you can do what you all can do on the computer. You can run Microsoft Excel, Word, PowerPoint. You can even connect it with the keyboard and type it. And you can send emails just like you do on this. You can do everything that you want to do. Now, ITAT is a final fact-finding authority to say, how do you want to classify an iPad? Whether because of its activity, it is to be classified as a computer, or because of its activity, it is to be classified as a mobile phone. On the facts, ITAT is the final authority. It will give its final word. You cannot question the findings of the ITAT before High Court, because after ITAT, we all know it is High Court and then Supreme Court. Before High Court, you can go only when it is a question of law, which rate would apply. But so far as the activity is concerned, the analysis, the factual analysis of any issue is concerned, that ITAT will provide. Take another example. I have claimed I'm a businessman. I have a vehicle. I use it for my business purpose, and I keep a log how much I use it for personal purpose, that vehicle, and how much I use it for business purpose. I keep a log of kilometers and all and usage of the vehicle. Now it is the ITAT which will examine the facts, whether I have actually used my vehicle for business purpose or for personal purpose, and based on that it will decide. Now let's say Itat holds against me. So what is the option? I go to High Court. Now High Court will say, okay, hey, listen, we can only decide whether you are eligible for depreciation or whether you are eligible to claim an expenditure or not. We are not going into read your records to ascertain actually whether you have used it for business purpose or personal purpose. This is for the lower authorities to decide. AO will have one evidence, CIT appeal will have another evidence. ITAT, after examining all the evidence, will give its finding. So far as facts is concerned, ITAT is the final authority. If on facts ITAT says you are eligible, good. If on facts ITAT says you are not eligible, then you can't go to a High Court and ask High Court, hey, look, verify my document and see I'm eligible. No. This is the job which ITAT has done. We are not going to look into it. And there is effectively no alternate remedy available. And that is the final order. You can't go to High Court. But yes, if it is a question of law, whether I'm eligible or not from factual point of view, from a section's other conditions point of view, then you can go to the High Court. Let's move. Benches. Clear? That is clear. If there is query, please let me know. So the bench is constituted to hear the matters and dispose of the matters by the appellate tribunal. A bench is normally consisting of a judicial member and an accountant member. And the constitution of a single member bench and a special bench is also permissible. And it is the president of the ITAT that gives the necessary direction for the constitution of a special bench in certain special circumstances. What are those circumstances? When can a special bench be formed? So see, the normal situation, if the addition amount involved is, let's say in this example, let us complete 255.3 and then we talk about special bench. So there are three benches: single member bench, division bench, larger bench, and then special bench. Now 255.3 provides that the president or other member of the tribunal authorized by the government may dispose of any case which pertains to the assessee whose total income as computed by O in the said case is less than 50 lakh or it doesn't exceed 50 lakh. So that means it's a small matter. It can be referred to a single member bench. एक ही adjudicating authority होगी which will hear the matter. Otherwise, other than this case, in all cases it is a division bench. There would be one accountant member and judicial member. In certain situations, a special bench is formed. For example, where there are two views or multiple views or different views on the same issue by different tribunals. For example, whether mobile is to be treated, whether iPad is to be treated as a mobile or it is a laptop. One Ahmedabad ITAT says no, it's phone. Bombay ITAT says no, it is laptop. And the Surat bench says something else. Kolkata ITAT says something else. So in that case, there are different views. So president say, okay, let's keep one view. We form a special bench which will only adjudicate this matter. So in point 5, you can see they may form a special bench of 3 or even more members. However, minimum two member, like one would be judicial and another would be accountant. So as we mentioned, there are two members in a typical situation. What if the opinion of member differ? One person says, no, it is computer. Another person says, no, it is mobile phone. Or there is any kind of adjudication matter where there is a difference of opinion. Then what will happen? In that case, if there is a difference of opinion on any point, they will be decided by the majority. If there is no majority, if the members are equally divided, like if it is a division bench, then there is the concept of third member. Then they will state in writing on which point they differ, and then case will be president by the president of the will be referred by the president of ITAT for hearing by one or more other members of the tribunal, which we call as third member, and then the answer or the matter would be disposed of based on the majority view, including those who heard the matter previously. So this is just procedural section. You can read, nothing much to debate or discuss. So one question is, in which form the appeal is to be filed? Is it form 35? So for Itat, the form is different. It is form 36. But largely the format would be same. There would be few additional questions, and some questions may not be common. So once you complete this, we'll now go to High Court. We'll discuss High Court section. Yes, Form 36 cannot be filed from IT portal. You have to log into the ITAT website and upload it online. And alternatively, you can go to visit the Itat and file it physically. Yes, Form 36 is to be filed on the website of ITAT. So there are some interesting issues and judgments relating to the power of ITAT and other aspects. We will see once we reach the sort of case laws. Mostly it would be in the next session because we have now only 25 minutes effectively left. So we'll complete by that time the High Court and Supreme Court related provisions. Appeal to the High Court. So we all discussed some time back that ITAT is the final fact-finding authority, and therefore the appeal to the High Court will not lie if it is an issue relating to discussion on facts, analysis of facts. It is only when the case involves, now market is very, very important, substantial question of law. 260 capital A provides that an appeal shall lie to the High Court from every order passed in appeal by the appellate tribunal. They have not specified the type of order. Number one, differentiation. Number two, they will not entertain an appeal if it involves analysis of facts. It has to be question of law. So these two are important differentiation. If the High Court is satisfied that the case involves a substantial question of law, if the court is satisfied, then it shall formulate that question. Now, anyone would like to try to define or understand what is substantial question of law? What do you understand? Give me some illustrations. Anybody would like to try? Wrong answers are also welcome. See, when you give wrong answer, you remember the right answer forever. Yes, first answer is correct. If it involves interpretation of law, it is a substantial question of law. Yes. No AI based answers. No ChatGPT answers. Any other? Just one answer. Okay. So let us try to find, I think, is defined. Just a minute, on which page number it is. I'll open it. Page number 59. We are on page 17. Okay. So there is no definition of substantial question of law in section 260 or any other provision of the income tax law. But then courts have attempted to define what do we mean by the term substantial question of law. It is not defined anywhere in the Act. It has acquired a definite meaning through various judicial pronouncements. Something which directly or indirectly affects not the rights of the party, but the substantial rights of the parties. The question is of a general, see, what you are reading is not necessarily applicable only under the income tax law. It can be under any other law. They are not saying substantial question of tax law. It is a substantial question of law. The question is of general public importance. You can file an appeal. Where it is open, it is an open question in a sense that issue is not settled by the pronouncement of Supreme Court or any other court. So Privy Council was the concept is not there, but that was there previously. So it's in those situations, like if there is some open question and it has not been yet decided upon by the Supreme Court, in that case, that becomes a substantial question of law. The issue is not free from difficulty. For example, on a particular issue, there are debatable views, which we discussed for which special bench is to be constituted. So likewise, if there is any issue and there are debatable issues which are undecided, which are creating a lot of difficulty in the implementation of law, even those questions can be treated as substantial question of law. Or if there is any issue, as I mentioned, a debatable issue and calls for an alternate view, then again it becomes a substantial question of law. There may be a question involving constitutional validity of the provision. For example, if a provision is introduced which is against or contrary or violative or ultra-virus the Constitution of India, that can be questioned and appealed, questioned in an appeal before the High Court, because ITAT cannot discuss or decide upon the constitutional validity of any provision. It is only the High Court and Supreme Court of India. They have been empowered to adjudicate those matters. So if an issue involves the challenging the validity of law itself, or a provision of a law, or even a rule of a law, that can be a substantial question of law because it is contrary to the Constitution of India. If yes, classification of investment as capital asset or as a business asset. Now, this is not a substantial question of law in my view, because this classification, for example, if you hold the shares, whether you hold it as a stock or as an investment, it depends upon the factual analysis. For example, your conduct, your qualification, your nature of business, the frequency at which you transact, all those involve the facts. Whereas the treatment or the tax treatment of an income arising out of any of these investments, that can be a substantial question of law. But the classification will not be a substantial question of law. In my view, it will have to be the ITAT, which will be the final authority, which will have a word on this issue. So now we will go back to the High Court provision 260 capital A. So then you can file an appeal before High Court if it is a substantial. So there is not much to be discussed. You can read these procedural provisions in relation to the High Court. The appeal is to be filed within 120 days. Period of time is 120 days from the date on which the order is received by the assessee or the commissioner, because even department can file the appeal. Matter on which appeal can be heard. Appeal shall be held only on the question of law formulated. However, during the course, you can put an additional question as well, which was not subject matter before. So this is all simple to understand. We may read it on our own, not anything technical. There will be two judges which will decide the matter, and decision of majority will apply in case of difference of opinion. So likewise, in case of appeal to the Supreme Court. Now, there is a interesting aspect. You can appeal to the Supreme Court from any judgment of High Court, provided High Court certifies the matter to be a fit one for appeal to the High Court. So you have to take a leave or a permission or even a certificate from the High Court that you are eligible to file an appeal before Supreme Court, or this matter can be filed. If the High Court doesn't grant you permission, or if it doesn't grant you a fitment sort of a certificate permission, then you cannot appeal to the Supreme Court. So that is a must. But practically, in almost majority of the cases, High Court does grant the certificate to file an appeal before the Supreme Court. This is the summary. Time limit for filing an appeal. What we discussed, if it relates to appeal before CIT appeal, then within 30 days. If it is an appeal before Appellate Tribunal, 60 days, which has now been changed to 2 months from the end of the month in which orders ought to be appealed against is communicated. In case of High Court, it is 120 days. And in case of Supreme Court, the law doesn't specify timeline, but then the procedure prescribed in the rules of the court needs to be followed. The above timeline can be extended by the authority. So as I mentioned earlier, in case of bona fide cases, the timeline can be, the delay can be condoned and it can be extended, provided you give a sufficient cause for not presenting the appeal within the specified time. Now let us spend last 10-15 minutes on these two interesting sections. Procedure to avoid the repetitive appeal on identical question of law. So many a time what happens, like for example, you filed a return for assessment year, let's say 18-19. Return is processed. Officer is making an addition. He is making a disallowance of depreciation. You file an appeal. Appeal goes through the process of CIT appeal, then ITAT, and finally, let's say it is pending before High Court or Supreme Court. By the time you cross these stages, it takes a number of years. Maybe after 10 years only you will be before High Court. What happens in the meantime? In the return of income, you continue to claim the depreciation on a very same item which has been subject matter of appeal. Officer has denied. Appellate authorities have also, let's say, denied. You keep on making claim and department keeps on making additions. And contrary also. You keep on claiming additions, you keep on getting favors at appeal level, Itat level, but then department keeps on fighting to the next level and matter is pending before High Court or Supreme Court. So there is a lot of repetition that happens, a lot of mechanical process. Like for example, every time officer will have to carry out an assessment, and then what you have to do, you have to present an appeal and you have to file it before the High Court or Supreme Court. So this process keeps on going. So what this section 158 capital A says, let us read it line by line. Section 158A makes a provision for avoiding the repetitive appeals. There's a repetition involved. When an identical question of law is pending before a High Court or Supreme Court. What does it say? The section is applicable to a situation where assessee claims that any question of law, please note it has to be a question of law, not the question of fact or issue of fact, which arises in his case for an assessment year which is pending before AO or an appellate authority, is identical with the question of law arising in his case for another assessment year. So as I mentioned, the question of law arising in a particular year is identical to the question of law arising in his case. Now please note, what is important is in his case. So it should not be someone else's case which is pending before Supreme Court and I can take the benefit of this section. No. The question of law should be pending in my case and on the same question of law, identical, not even the word similar they have used, not even broadly similar. It has to be identical question of law which is arising in the subsequent year, which is pending in appeal under section 260A before so and so, or in reference before the Supreme Court. Then what? Assessee will furnish a declaration. What declaration? Assessee will furnish a declaration in a particular format that if the AO or the appellate authority, that means the lower authorities, they may agree to apply in the present case. Like as I mentioned, for AY 18-19, I have filed an appeal which is pending before High Court after crossing multiple layers of appellate process. Now we are on AY 22-23 and 23-24, let's say. We are in 23-24. And now what will I say? I'll file a declaration. I'll say on the identical issue matter is pending before the High Court. And in this case, the assessee agrees to apply the final decision passed on the other case. Other case means it is only my case, but hereinafter it is referred to as an other case. Assessee shall not raise and again the same question of law in appeal before any authority or in appeal before High Court or Supreme Court. So I'll file a declaration. I'm not going to raise the same question of law. Once the declaration is filed, the assessing officer will issue a report on the correctness. What he will do, where the declaration is furnished by the assessee to an appellate authority shall call for report from the AO on the correctness of the claim. कि हाँ भाई same issue है, जो AY 18-19 में था वही 23-24 में है. Is it identical? फिर AO will make a request to the appellate authority to give him an opportunity if he allows such opportunities. This is easy. Will give an opportunity. Admission or rejection of claim by the order in writing. AO will pass an order in writing. Either they will admit my claim or my contention that yes, it is an identical issue and condition is satisfied, or they will reject the claim. If they reject the claim, that is the end of the story. Then I will have to follow the normal procedure. I again file the appeal for AY23 choice, and in the meantime, agar dusre bhi saal hai, I keep filing the appeal. But in case he is admitting the appeal that yes, the question of law is identical in the present case as well as the other case, then what? What are the consequences? The AO or the authority, they make an order disposing of the present case without waiting for the final decision of the other case. Okay. And the assessee would not be entitled to raise in relation to the relevant case such question of law and appeal before appellate authority or any high court. Same question of law I will not raise again by way of appeal before any other authority. What we are going to achieve by this? Let's see. When the final decision of the Supreme Court or High Court on the question of law is passed in the other case, this is important. In the other case, that means the AY 1819 case, when the final decision is passed, then the AO or the appellate authority, they would apply it in the present case and they will amend the order passed in order to conform to the decision. So let us understand the whole situation easily in 1 second. AY 1819, I filed the return, AO made an addition, he disallowed me the depreciation. I filed an appeal before appellate authority, they also disallowed. I ultimately went to Supreme Court. Matter is pending. Right now we are in 2025. In between we have 5 assessment years, 1920, 2021, 2022. All those years I continue to claim the depreciation because I feel I'm entitled and decision will be in my favor. So I keep on claiming it. Officer keeps on rejecting it. So the issue involved is identical. So I say, hey, look, I'm not going to file an appeal. Instead, I'm filing a declaration. However, when the matter is finally heard and disposed of by the Supreme Court, the outcome of that matter you will have to apply to all those years for which I did not file the appeal. This is the sum and substance of this provision. By this, we'll avoid the repetitive number of appeals and backlog would be reduced. What if the order is rejected? In that case, I would have no authority or alternate remedy to file an appeal against that rejection order. For example, I make a declaration that I don't want to file a repetitive appeal, but the officer says, no, I'm going to reject it, rejecting the claim. In that case, you can't, against that rejection, file an appeal, or even against any kind of admission, you cannot call it into question before any proceeding or in that case. What is the meaning of appellate authority? So it is up to Itat, CIT appeal, joint CIT appeal, and the Itat. And case means any proceeding under the Act, including imposition of penalty. Now the likewise provision for revenue, section 158 AB, deferment of appeal by revenue when an identical question of law is pending before the High Court or Supreme Court. What does it say? It says that where the collegium comprising of 2 or more chief commissioner or commissioner are of the opinion, or collegium is of the opinion that any question of law arising in case of an assessee is identical, again the same condition. In his case, now there is a slight variation. Even in any other case for other AY or in the case of any other assessee. So there are 2 assessees, Mr. X and Mr. Y. Both are facing disallowance of depreciation on same asset. The question is identical. However, in Mr. X's case, the appeal is pending before the High Court or before the Supreme Court under 261, or even especially petition is filed, let's say, under 136 of the Constitution of India. So in any case, just understand that the matter is pending before the Supreme Court in the case of Mr. X. Then what? Collegium may decide and inform the commissioner not to file an appeal at this stage to the tribunal or to the High Court in the relevant case against the order of Joint Commissioner so-and-so against the appellate authority, and then direction to AO to make an application to the tribunal or High Court. So they will make a recommendation, don't go to High Court or Tribunal, the question is already pending. On receipt of communication from the collegium, the commissioner will direct the AO to make an application to the tribunal concerned, because Mr. Y के केस में addition already हो चुका है, उसको favor भी मिल गया CIT appeal में, but then he will go to the tribunal, and in case the matter is before High Court, he will go to the High Court, and then what will happen? By what time? Within 120 days from the date of receipt of commissioner appeal or Itat as the case may be, stating that an appeal on the identical or question of law may be filed when the decision on the question of law becomes final in the other case. Same, if what is held in the case of Mr. X, based on that we will follow that ruling and we are not filing that appeal now. Now this is notwithstanding anything contained in 253(3) or 268, which provides for time limit of filing of appeal, because time limit is 60 days or 120 days, or rather in Itat it is 2 months. So time limit will lapse, but then they'll put it on hold because there is a lot of backlog which is created on the repetitiveness of the matter. Application to be made only if the assessee accepts that the question of law is identical. What are the consequences where the order of appellate level is not in conformity with the High Court or Supreme Court's decision in the other case? Where the order of appellate authority is not in conformity with the final decision on the question of law in the other case. If the High Court or Supreme Court, let's say, decides the other case in favor of department, as and when such order is received, then the commissioner may direct the officer to appeal to the appellate tribunal or jurisdictional high court as the case may be against such order. Clear? Unless otherwise provided in 158 AB, all the provisions appeal to appellate tribunal, they will apply accordingly. So this is just a clarificatory. Yes. By what time the appeal is to be filed in the relevant case? The appeal will be filed within 60 days to the tribunal or within 120 days to the High Court from the date on which order of High Court or Supreme Court is communicated to the CIT. Now this whole story you can understand, or the provision you can understand with the help of an example. Things would be very clear. Let us suppose a question of law has arisen in the case of an assessee, Mr. X, and he has received a favorable decision on the Q1 question 1 from the CIT appeal. So first level, it is in my favor, not in the department's favor. In case of another assessee, Mr. Y, where the department's appeal on identical question of law in his case is pending before the jurisdictional High Court or Supreme Court, right? So on same issue, but different assessee, matter is pending before the Supreme Court. Now the commissioner, that is the collegium of commissioners, is of the opinion that Q1, question 1, in case of Mr. X and question 2 in case of Mr. Y, they are both identical. So therefore, they say that the provisions of 158 AB can be invoked by revenue to defer the filing of appeal for question or issue involved in Mr. X to the higher authority till the decision in the case of Mr. Y is communicated to the department having jurisdiction. Mr. X in such a decision on deferment, it will be subject to the acceptance by the assessee, which is Mr. X, that the question of law is identical or not. So that is subject to the acceptance by the assessee. So I think with this example, we should be clear. And in case if there is anything you want to discuss, we can connect. Otherwise, for today, it is sufficient. Revision and low tax effect circular in some of the case law, DRP, all that we'll discuss probably in the next session, that is on 4th of February. All right, Ashok ji. I think if there are no questions, then we can probably end the session. All right. Thank you. Thank you.